6 hours after the battle began, the last Zephyrian ship exploded in Earth's atmosphere, and the invasion was over. Captain Ben Walker looked out at the peaceful Pacific Ocean and smiled. The water showed no trace of the underground civilization that had built humanity's revenge. The Ghost Fleet had done its job perfectly, and the aliens never knew what hit them. Admiral Kate Morrison appeared on the communication screen from her flagship, the USS Neptune. Her face was tired but satisfied. The Atlantic Division had completely destroyed the alien command structure and captured 3 major Zephyrian officers. The prisoners were being taken to underwater interrogation facilities where they would reveal everything they knew about their empire. Captain Dan Hughes reported similar success from the Indian Ocean. His Marines had boarded 17 alien vessels and recovered massive amounts of enemy technology. The Zephyrian computers contained detailed maps of their entire empire, including the locations of military bases and supply routes. Humanity now knew exactly where to strike next. Dr. Amy Rodriguez contacted Ben from her deep-sea laboratory, where she had spent the last 50 years preparing for this moment. The old scientist was reviewing captured alien data and making plans for the next phase of operations. She had discovered that the Zephyrian Empire was much larger than originally thought, but also more vulnerable than they realized. The alien empire controlled 47 star systems and had conquered over 30 different species. Their military was spread thin across vast distances and relied on their reputation for invincibility to maintain control. They had never faced serious resistance, and their defenses were designed more for intimidation than actual warfare. Amy's analysis of Zephyrian technology revealed critical weaknesses that could be exploited. Their ships were powerful but slow to maneuver. Their weapons were devastating at long range but weak in close combat. Most importantly, their entire military doctrine was based on fighting other energy weapon-using species, and they had no defense against human kinetic weapons. Ben studied the star charts that showed Zephyrian territory stretching across a section of the galaxy. The Empire's capital world was surrounded by dozens of military installations and shipyards. Their fleet bases were positioned to control major trade routes and intimidate conquered species. It was a perfect target for human raiders. The Ghost Fleet was already preparing for interstellar operations. Each ship carried enough supplies for months of independent operation, and their fusion reactors could run for years without refueling. The vessels were designed to strike fast and disappear before enemy reinforcements could arrive. Maya Chen presented Ben with the technical specifications for humanity's new interstellar drive systems. The technology was based on captured alien data combined with 50 years of human innovation. The Ghost Fleet could now travel between star systems faster than any Zephyrian vessel, and their ships would be invisible to alien sensors. Lieutenant Karen Stone had been analyzing enemy communications for patterns and weaknesses. The Zephyrians used a centralized command structure that relied on regular reports from all their military units. When the Earth invasion fleet failed to report in the Empire would send investigators to find out what happened. Ben ordered the Ghost Fleet to prepare for immediate departure. They would leave Earth's oceans and strike Zephyrian targets throughout the galaxy before the aliens realized their invasion had failed. The element of surprise was humanity's greatest weapon, and they could not waste it. The first target was a major Zephyrian military base in the Proxima system. The base controlled shipping routes for 3 sectors and housed over 50 enemy warships. Ben's division would destroy the base while Admiral Morrison attacked supply depots in the Centauri region, and Captain Hughes raided shipyards in the Vega system. As the Ghost Fleet prepared to depart, Ben received a message from the surviving human leadership on Earth. Commander Jake Martinez and Communications Officer Lisa Park had been coordinating resistance efforts from hidden bunkers. They reported that alien ground forces were surrendering everywhere now that their fleet was destroyed. The surface military was beginning the process of rebuilding Earth's defenses, but they knew the real protection came from the Ghost Fleet. As long as the underwater navy existed, humanity would never again be vulnerable to alien invasion. The secret that had taken 50 years to build would protect Earth for generations to come. 3 months later, Zephyrian High Command was meeting. In emergency session on their capital world, Fleet Admiral Zarath was reading reports from across the Empire that made no sense. Entire military bases had vanished overnight. Supply convoys were disappearing without trace. Frontier outposts were going silent one by one. The attacks all followed the same pattern. Ships appeared from nowhere and struck with devastating precision before vanishing back into empty space. The attacking vessels used unknown technology and left no survivors to describe their capabilities. Zephyrian fleets sent to investigate found only debris and silence. Zarath studied the tactical data from the few engagements where his ships had managed to fight back. The enemy used kinetic weapons that penetrated Zephyrian shields effortlessly. Their ships were small and fast, but carried firepower that rivaled the Empire's heaviest dreadnoughts. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to know exactly where every Zephyrian base and patrol route was located. The attacks were coordinated across vast distances with perfect timing. Multiple Zephyrian installations would be hit simultaneously by different enemy fleets. The raiders demonstrated knowledge of Empire military procedures that suggested they had been studying Zephyrian tactics for decades. Intelligence reports from frontier worlds spoke of mysterious attackers who called themselves humans. The species was supposed to be primitive and had been scheduled for conquest by Admiral Calex's fleet. But Calex had never reported the success of his mission, and all contact with his invasion force had been lost. Other alien species throughout the galaxy were beginning to whisper about the mysterious new threat. Traders spoke of entire Zephyrian fleets found drifting dead in space. Pirates reported that human ships appeared from nowhere and demanded they leave certain star systems immediately. Even the powerful Andromedan Confederacy was asking questions about these strange new warriors. The rumors described impossible technology and tactics that defied everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Ships that could move through both water and space. Weapons that fired solid projectiles at impossible speeds. Warriors who fought with a ferocity that terrified species that had never known fear. Fleet Admiral Zarath ordered a massive military build-up and called for all available ships to defend the capital system. The Zephyrian Empire that had seemed invincible just months earlier was now afraid of shadows and jumping at every sensor contact. Their reputation for invincibility was crumbling as word spread of their defeats. But the humans were just getting started. Ben Walker led his fleet deeper into Zephyrian territory with each successful raid. Every captured base provided intelligence for the next attack. Every destroyed convoy weakened the Empire's ability to respond. The Ghost Fleet was systematically dismantling 47 star systems worth of military infrastructure. Admiral Morrison's Atlantic Division had perfected hit-and-run tactics that left Zephyrian commanders paralyzed with indecision. Her ships would appear at the edge of a star system and destroy everything before vanishing again. By the time enemy reinforcements arrived, they found only wreckage and the ghosts of human laughter in the static. Captain Hughes specialized in capturing enemy technology and personnel. His boarding teams had taken hundreds of Zephyrian prisoners and enough alien equipment to outfit 10 more. Admiral Calix stared at his command display in complete disbelief as human warships emerged from every ocean on the planet. His tactical computers were showing readings that made no sense. These primitive humans were using technology that his own species had never developed. Power signatures indicated fusion reactors more advanced than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. The first human ship to break the surface fired a projectile that moved faster than his sensors could track. The tungsten rod struck his flagship's shields at 20% light speed and punched through them like they were made of air. The impact sent shock waves through the entire vessel and overloaded half the ship's systems. Calix had conquered 12 worlds for the Zephyrian Empire. He had faced desperate resistance from dozens of species, but nothing like this. Every other species had used energy weapons and particle shields that his fleet could counter easily. These humans were firing solid projectiles that his technology could not stop. Captain Ben Walker watched the alien flagship reel from his railgun shot and immediately ordered his weapons teams to target the ship's engines. Ryan Cole fired 3 quantum torpedoes that phased through the alien hull and exploded inside the vessel's reactor compartments. The Zephyrian command ship began to break apart as secondary explosions tore through its crystalline structure. All across Earth's skies, the same scene was playing out. Admiral Kate Morrison's Atlantic Fleet was systematically destroying the alien orbital stations with devastating precision. Her dreadnoughts fired in coordinated volleys that overwhelmed enemy point defenses and shattered alien hulls with kinetic impact. The Zephyrians tried to adapt their tactics, but they were fighting an enemy that had spent 50 years studying their technology. Every countermeasure the aliens deployed had already been anticipated and countered. Lieutenant Karen Stone coordinated targeting data between human ships to ensure maximum damage with every shot. Captain Dan Hughes led his Indian Ocean fleet in brutal close-range attacks that the aliens were not prepared for. His ships used experimental cloaking technology to appear directly beside enemy vessels before opening fire at point-blank range. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy willing to fight at such close quarters. Engineer Maya Chen monitored the Leviathan's experimental systems as they performed beyond all expectations. The ship's adaptive armor was learning from each alien attack and becoming more resistant to enemy weapons. The quantum processors were analyzing Zephyrian technology in real time and finding new weaknesses to exploit. What terrified the aliens most was not just the human technology, but the way humans fought. Every other species the Zephyrians had conquered had tried to preserve their own lives and minimize casualties. The humans showed no such restraint. They fought with a savagery and determination that shocked the galaxy's supposed apex predators. Ben Walker ordered his fleet to pursue fleeing alien ships without mercy. The Ghost Fleet had been designed to leave no survivors who could report back to the Zephyrian Empire. Every alien vessel had to be destroyed completely to maintain the secret of humanity's true capabilities. The battle above Earth lasted only 6 hours, but it changed everything. The Zephyrian invasion fleet that had conquered the planet in a single day was completely annihilated by humans emerging from the depths. Not one alien ship escaped to carry word of their defeat back to the Empire. Admiral Calix died when his flagship's reactor exploded, but not before sending one final transmission to Zephyrian High Command. His message was brief and filled with terror. He reported that humans had technology that defied understanding and fought like demons from the deepest pits of hell. The transmission cut off as his ship disintegrated around him, The human victory was so complete that alien survivors on the surface surrendered immediately when they saw their fleet burning in the sky. The occupation forces that had seemed invincible 3 days earlier threw down their weapons and begged for mercy. They had never seen their own ships destroyed so easily. Lieutenant Sam Foster intercepted desperate alien communications from across the galaxy. Zephyrian outposts were reporting that they had lost contact with the Earth invasion fleet. Other alien species were picking up scattered transmissions about humans with impossible technology. The news was spreading fear throughout the galactic community. Ben stood on his bridge and watched the last alien ship explode in Earth's atmosphere. The Ghost Fleet had accomplished its primary mission perfectly. Earth was free, and the aliens had learned nothing about humanity's true capabilities. The element of surprise was still intact for the next phase of operations. Dr. Amy Rodriguez appeared on the ship's communication screen from her underwater laboratory. The elderly scientist was smiling despite the decades of sacrifice that had led to this moment. She congratulated Ben on the perfect execution of Operation Deep Strike and confirmed that Phase 2 was ready to begin. Admiral Kate Morrison contacted Ben from her flagship in the Atlantic. Her division had completely destroyed the alien command structure over Europe and Africa. The enemy's orbital control network was in ruins, and their communication satellites had been eliminated. Earth's skies belonged to humanity once again. Captain Dan Hughes reported that his boarding teams had captured significant amounts of alien technology and several live prisoners. The Zephyrian equipment would be reverse-engineered to improve human weapon systems. The prisoners would be questioned to learn more about the galactic political situation. Maya Chen presented Ben with analysis of the battle data. The human weapons had performed even better than expected. The rail guns had punched through alien armor that was supposedly impenetrable. The quantum torpedoes had bypassed enemy shields completely. The electromagnetic pulse weapons had disabled entire enemy formations with single shots. What impressed Maya most was how the alien shields had failed against human kinetic weapons. The Zephyrians had designed their defenses to stop energy attacks, because that was what every other galactic species used. They had never encountered a species primitive enough to still use solid projectiles, but advanced enough to accelerate them to impossible velocities. Karen Stone reported that intercepted alien transmissions were full of references to impossible human technology. The Zephyrians were trying to understand how a species they had dismissed as primitive could have weapons that surpassed their own. Some alien scientists were suggesting that humans must have received help from an unknown advanced civilization. Ryan Cole was already preparing his weapon systems for the next phase of operations. The Ghost Fleet was not designed just for planetary defense, but for offensive operations across the galaxy. Every ship carried enough supplies and ammunition for extended campaigns far from Earth. Ben knew that the real war was just beginning. The Zephyrian Empire controlled dozens of star systems and had military bases throughout the galaxy. They would eventually notice that their Earth invasion fleet had disappeared completely. When they sent investigators, they would find only empty space and the wreckage of their ships. The Ghost Fleet had proven that humanity could fight and win against galactic powers. Now they had to take the war to the enemy before the aliens could prepare for human technology. The next phase would involve attacks on Zephyrian military installations and supply lines throughout their empire. As Earth's oceans returned to their peaceful appearance, Ben prepared to lead his fleet into interstellar space. The Zephyrians and Every other species that looked at Earth with conquest in their hearts were about to learn a terrible lesson about underestimating human determination and ingenuity. 3 days after the Zephyrian occupation began, Captain Ben Walker received the activation signal he had been waiting 50 years to hear. The message came directly from the deepest command bunker where the last free human leaders were hiding. It was simple and clear. Operation Deep Strike was now authorized. The Ghost Fleet was free to surface and engage the enemy. Ben stood on the bridge of the USS Leviathan as it began its ascent from the Mariana Trench. The ship had been resting on the ocean floor for months while the crew monitored alien communications and waited for orders. Now the massive vessel was rising through the dark water with its engines running silent and its weapon systems charging to full power. Around the Leviathan, dozens of other ships were also ascending. The entire Pacific Division of the Ghost Fleet was moving as one coordinated unit. Each ship had been assigned specific targets based on months of observation. The aliens had no idea what was coming for them from the depths below. In the Atlantic Ocean, Admiral Kate Morrison was leading her division up from their hidden base in the mid-Atlantic Ridge. Her flagship, the USS Neptune, was even larger than the Leviathan and carried experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. Kate had spent 15 years preparing for this moment, and she was determined to make it count. The Atlantic Division included 40 dreadnoughts and 60 stealth cruisers. Each dreadnought carried railguns capable of firing projectiles at 20% the speed of light. The stealth cruisers were invisible to all known sensor types and carried quantum torpedoes that could phase through solid matter before exploding inside enemy hulls. Captain Dan Hughes commanded the Indian Ocean Division. From his flagship, the USS Kraken, his ships had been hiding in the deepest trenches of the Indian Ocean for decades. Dan's division specialized in close combat and boarding actions. Their ships carried experimental marines equipped with power armor and weapons designed to fight aliens hand to hand. The timing of the operation was crucial. All 3 divisions had to surface simultaneously to achieve maximum surprise. The aliens had spread their ships across Earth's skies in standard occupation patterns. They were not expecting any threat, and their shields were configured for surface attacks only. They had never considered the possibility of attacks coming from the ocean. Ben watched his tactical display as the Leviathan passed through the deep ocean layers. Tactical Officer Karen Stone was coordinating with the other ships to ensure perfect timing. Weapons Specialist Ryan Cole was running final checks on the ship's arsenal. Engineer Maya Chen was monitoring the fusion reactor that powered their experimental systems. The Ghost Fleet had advantages that no surface navy could match. Their ships were designed to operate in the crushing pressure of the deep ocean, which made them incredibly strong. Their hulls could withstand direct hits from energy weapons that would vaporize normal spacecraft. Their power systems were based on fusion technology that was decades ahead of anything the aliens expected to encounter. Each ship in the Ghost Fleet carried weapons specifically designed to counter alien technology. The railguns fired solid projectiles that could not be deflected by energy shields. The quantum torpedoes used principles of physics that most species had never discovered. The electromagnetic pulse cannons could disable entire enemy fleets with a single shot. Lieutenant Sam Foster was monitoring alien communications from his station in the Leviathan's intelligence center. The Zephyrians were completely focused on managing their occupation of Earth's surface. They were discussing how to process human prisoners and exploit Earth's resources. None of their transmissions mentioned any concern about threats from the ocean. As the Ghost Fleet rose through the water, Ben remembered his training. Every member of the crew had spent years studying alien technology and tactics. They knew exactly how Zephyrian ships were constructed and where their weak points were located. They had practiced these attacks countless times in underwater simulation chambers. The Leviathan broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean just as the sun was setting. The massive ship emerged from the water like a metal mountain rising from the depths. Its hull was black and angular with weapons turrets that looked like the spines of some deep-sea creature. Steam rose from its hull as the cold ocean water met the heat of its fusion reactors. All around the Pacific, similar ships were breaking the surface. The ocean erupted with the emergence of humanity's hidden fleet. Ships that had never seen sunlight before rose from the abyss with their weapons already locked onto alien targets. The surface of the ocean was suddenly filled with vessels that should not exist. Ben gave the order to fire as soon as the Leviathan's main railgun cleared the water. The weapon accelerated a tungsten projectile to impossible velocity and sent it screaming toward the nearest Zephyrian cruiser. The projectile struck the alien ship's hull and punched straight through its shields like they were made of paper. The enemy vessel exploded in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire sky. Across the Pacific Ocean, similar explosions were blooming as the Ghost Fleet opened fire. Ryan Cole's weapons teams were firing quantum torpedoes that phased directly into alien reactor cores. The Zephyrian ships that had seemed invincible 3 days earlier were being torn apart by weapons they had never encountered before. In the Atlantic, Admiral Kate Morrison's dreadnoughts were systematically destroying the alien command ships. Her railguns fired in perfect coordination to overwhelm enemy defenses. The Zephyrian fleet that controlled the European occupation was being eliminated with ruthless efficiency. The aliens had no time to adapt or respond. Captain Dan Hughes led his Indian Ocean Division in close assault attacks on alien landing ships. His Marines used experimental teleportation technology to board enemy vessels and capture their technology. The Zephyrians found themselves fighting humans with power armor and energy weapons that matched their own advanced equipment. The alien. Admiral Calix watched his tactical displays in horror as human ships appeared from oceans across the planet. His intelligence networks had detected no trace of these vessels. The technology readings made no sense. These humans were using power sources and weapons that his species had never encountered in 50 years of galactic conquest. Karen Stone reported that alien communications were filled with panic and confusion. The Zephyrians were trying to understand where these ships had come from and how they had remained hidden. Their sensors showed fusion reactors and quantum processors that should not exist on such a primitive world. The battle was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Human ships fought with precision and coordination that came from decades of preparation. Every shot was calculated and every tactic was designed to exploit alien weaknesses that had been identified through years of intelligence gathering. Ben watched as his fleet systematically destroyed the Zephyrian occupation force. The aliens who had conquered 12 other worlds in as many years were being defeated by a species they had dismissed as primitive. The Ghost Fleet was proving that humanity's greatest strength was not its technology, but its ability to plan and prepare in absolute secrecy. As the last alien ship burned in Earth's atmosphere, Ben knew that this was only the beginning. The Ghost Fleet had been designed for more than just defense. These ships were capable of taking the war to the aliens. Home territory in the galaxy was about to learn that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. 50 years before the Zephyrian invasion, Dr. Amy Rodriguez was working late in her laboratory at the Deep Sea Research Institute in Hawaii. She was studying radio signals from space when she discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in the background noise of cosmic radiation were artificial patterns, patterns that could only come from an intelligent species. Amy spent months decoding the signals with her team. What they found was terrifying. The signals were communications between alien ships discussing Earth. The aliens called humans a primitive species that would be easy to conquer. They talked about Earth's resources and how they planned to harvest them. The invasion fleet was already being prepared. Amy took her findings to Admiral Paul Grant at the Pentagon. Paul was one of the few military leaders who understood that Earth needed to prepare for threats from space. He had been pushing for better orbital defenses, but nobody listened. When Amy showed him the decoded alien messages, his face went pale. The aliens would arrive in exactly 50 years. Paul and Amy realized that any alien species advanced enough to travel between stars would have technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. Traditional military thinking would not work. The aliens would expect resistance from surface armies and space defenses. They would be prepared for nuclear weapons and conventional warfare. Earth needed something completely different. Amy suggested something that sounded impossible. What if humanity built a secret military force that the aliens would never detect? What if that force was hidden in the one place no space-traveling species would think to look, the bottom of the ocean? Paul thought she was crazy, but the more they discussed it, the more sense it made. The project began in complete secrecy. Only 12 people in the entire world knew the truth about the coming invasion. They created false cover stories and hidden funding sources. They recruited the best engineers and military officers under the pretense of deep-sea research. Everything was compartmentalized so that even the workers did not know what they were really building. The first underwater base was constructed in the Mariana Trench using revolutionary new technology. Geothermal vents provided unlimited power. Advanced materials allowed structures to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep ocean. Automated mining systems harvested rare metals from the seafloor. Within 5 years, they had a fully functional underwater city. Captain Ben Walker was recruited 15 years into the project. He had been commanding a nuclear submarine when Admiral Grant approached him with a classified assignment. Paul told Ben that he would have to officially die in a training accident and leave his old life behind forever. Ben would become part of humanity's most important secret. Ben accepted without hesitation. He understood that sometimes sacrifice was necessary to protect the future. His fake funeral was held on a rainy Tuesday in Arlington Cemetery. His wife Karen cried over an empty coffin while Ben watched from a distance. Then he disappeared beneath the Pacific Ocean forever. The underwater shipyards were marvels of engineering that surpassed anything on the surface. Massive construction bays carved into underwater mountains could build ships larger than aircraft, carriers. The ships were designed using technology that would not exist on the surface for decades. Every vessel was a masterpiece of human engineering focused on one goal: destroying alien invaders. Ben's ship was the USS Leviathan. It was over 1,000 feet long and packed with experimental weapons systems. The hull was made from materials that could absorb energy weapons and redirect the power to the ship's own systems. The engines used fusion reactors that were decades ahead of surface technology. The weapons included railguns that could fire projectiles at impossible speeds and quantum torpedoes that could phase through enemy shields. The crew of the Leviathan included tactical officer Karen Stone, who had also faked her death to join the Ghost Fleet, weapons specialist Ryan Cole, had been recruited from the Navy SEALs after his unit was supposedly killed in a helicopter crash. Engineer Maya Chen was officially listed as missing after a laboratory explosion that never really happened. Each member of the Ghost Fleet had given up everything to protect humanity's future. They lived in the underwater cities and trained constantly for the day when they would be needed. They could never contact their families or return to the surface world. They were ghosts who existed only to serve as humanity's hidden guardians. The Ghost Fleet grew to 300 ships over 50 years. There were massive dreadnoughts armed with experimental weapons, stealth cruisers that could move undetected through water and space, carrier ships that held swarms of fighter craft designed for both underwater and space combat. Each vessel was crewed by volunteers who had officially died to keep the secret. Amy Rodriguez became the chief scientist of the underwater civilization. She was now an old woman, but her mind was still sharp. She had spent decades developing technologies that would give humanity an edge against more advanced aliens. Every weapon system was designed to counter the alien technology described in the intercepted communications. Admiral Paul Grant had died 10 years earlier, but his successor, Admiral Kate Morrison, continued his work. She commanded the Atlantic Division of the Ghost Fleet from an underwater base built into the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Captain Dan Hughes led the Indian Ocean Fleet from a base hidden beneath the deepest part of that ocean. The surface world had no idea that humanity's real military power was hidden beneath the waves. The regular Army and Navy were just a distraction. The orbital defenses were meant to be destroyed easily to make the aliens overconfident. The real plan was to let the aliens think they had won completely before revealing humanity's true strength. Ben Walker stood on the bridge of the Leviathan 3 miles below the Pacific surface. His crew was ready. The ship's weapons were charged, and the reactor was running at full power. Around him in the darkness, 300 other ships waited for the signal. They had been preparing for this moment for their entire adult lives. The invasion had begun exactly as the alien communications had predicted 50 years earlier. The surface defenses were destroyed and the major cities were occupied. The aliens thought they had won another easy victory. They had no idea that their real enemy was rising from the abyss below them. Karen Stone monitored alien communications from her station. The Zephyrians were discussing how quickly they had conquered Earth. They were amazed that such a primitive species had been so easy to defeat. Their ships were spread out in standard occupation patterns with no thought of defense. They felt completely safe. Ben smiled as he gave the order that would change everything. The Ghost Fleet began its ascent from the deepest parts of Earth's oceans. 50 years of preparation and sacrifice were about to pay off. The aliens had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to keep secrets and plan for the future. The greatest military force in human history was about to surface, and the galaxy would never be the same. The morning sky above Los Angeles turned dark as massive ships appeared from nowhere. Jake Martinez was drinking coffee on his apartment balcony when the first alien vessel materialized above the city. The ship was huge and made of what looked like black crystal. It blocked out the sun completely. More ships appeared across the sky until the entire city was covered in shadow. Jake grabbed his phone and tried to call his sister, but the line was dead. All the phones were dead. The internet stopped working. Even the radio in his kitchen made only static noise. He ran back to his balcony and saw hundreds of smaller ships dropping from the big ones. They moved fast and silent like black tears, falling from the sky. The smaller ships fired bright blue beams at the military base near the airport. The beams cut through buildings like they were made of paper. Explosions lit up the dark sky. Jake could see jets taking off from the base, but the blue beams destroyed them before they could fight back. In less than 10 minutes, the entire base was gone. Jake worked as a communications officer for the Pacific Defense Corps. He knew he had to get to the emergency command center downtown. He ran to his car and drove through streets full of people, running and screaming. The alien ships were landing everywhere. Soldiers in strange armor were coming out of the ships. They carried weapons that glowed blue and fired beams that turned everything to ash. At the command center, Jake found Commander Lisa Park trying to contact other military bases around the world. Her face was pale and her hands shook as she worked at the radio. She looked up when Jake arrived and shook her head. The news was bad everywhere. New York was under attack. London was burning. Tokyo had gone silent an hour ago. The aliens moved fast. Their weapons were too powerful, and their ships had shields that stopped every missile and bullet the human military could fire at them. The orbital defense stations that protected Earth from space attacks were destroyed in the first few minutes. The space elevators that carried supplies to the moon bases collapsed in flames. Humanity's entire space presence was wiped out before anyone could understand what was happening. Lisa finally made contact with a base in Colorado. The voice on the radio was full of panic. The man said alien soldiers were walking through their defenses like they were not there. Their bullets bounced off alien armor and their rockets exploded harmlessly against alien shields. The voice cut off in the middle of a scream. Jake looked at the screens showing news feeds from around the world. Every major city was under attack. The alien ships all looked the same. Black crystal that seemed to bend light around it. The soldiers wore armor that changed color to match their surroundings. They moved in perfect formation and never missed a shot. They did not take prisoners, and they did not negotiate. By noon, most of Earth's military forces were destroyed or retreating. The aliens had complete control of the skies and were taking over every major city. Their technology was so advanced that human weapons seemed like toys in comparison. Jake and Lisa watched helplessly as their world fell apart in hours. The alien commander appeared on every working screen around the world at exactly 3 p.m. He was tall and thin with skin that looked like silver metal. His eyes were completely black, and when he spoke, his voice sounded like metal scraping against metal. He said his name was Admiral Calyx of the Zephyrian Armada. He said Earth now belonged to the Zephyrian Empire. All humans must surrender immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Calyx explained that resistance was pointless. The Zephyrians had conquered 12 other worlds in the past 50 years. None had lasted more than a day against their technology. Earth's military was primitive and weak. The human species would serve the Empire or die. There would be no other choice. Jake felt sick watching the alien admiral speak. The way Calyx talked about humans made it clear he saw them as nothing more than animals. The Zephyrians had studied Earth for months before attacking. They knew exactly where to hit to cause maximum damage. They had planned everything perfectly. Lisa managed to contact a few surviving military units, but the reports were all the same. Human weapons could not penetrate alien shields. Human armor could not stop alien weapons. The few jets and helicopters that survived the first attack were quickly shot down when they tried to fight back. Ground forces were being slaughtered whenever they tried to make a stand. As the sun set, Jake and Lisa watched the alien ships settling over every major city on Earth. The Zephyrians were not just conquering, they were occupying. They set up energy barriers around important buildings and started herding civilians into containment areas. Anyone who resisted was killed instantly with those terrible blue beams. Jake thought about all the war movies he had watched growing up. In the movies, humans always found a way to fight back against alien invaders. They used nuclear weapons or computer viruses or found some weakness in alien technology. But this was real life, and the Zephyrians were too advanced. They had shields that stopped nuclear missiles, and their computers could not be hacked by human technology. Lisa suddenly grabbed Jake's arm. She was listening to something on her headset. Her eyes went wide and she started typing quickly on her keyboard. She looked around to make sure no one else could hear and whispered to Jake. She said she was getting a signal from somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. It was using old military codes that were supposed to be forgotten. The message was short and encrypted. Lisa worked for several minutes to decode it. When she finally succeeded, she stared at the screen in disbelief. The message said, "Operation Deep Strike is now active. All Ghost Fleet commanders prepare for surface deployment." It was signed by someone called Captain Ben Walker of something called the USS Leviathan. Jake had never heard of any USS Leviathan. He knew every ship in the Pacific Fleet, and there was no ship with that name. Lisa checked her database of all military vessels and found nothing. The message had to be fake or from some old training exercise. But the codes were real, and they were current. As alien ships continued their occupation of Earth's cities, Jake and Lisa wondered what the mysterious message could mean. Outside their window, the sky glowed with the light of burning buildings. The greatest military powers on Earth had fallen in a single day. Humanity seemed completely defeated. Neither Jake nor Lisa knew that deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for 50 years. Something the aliens had never detected and could never imagine. The real battle for Earth was about to begin.